Hello, Frizzle fish. So War for the Oaks is my favorite book. I just read it and it has reached that height. Yes, it is tied for the my favorite book spot with like 30 other books because I love a lot of books, but it has reached the top tier where it's tied with all the other top tier books, okay? Okay, it's really good. I have loved all the other books that I've read by this author, which is now all of her novels that she wrote by herself. But I had tried to start this book like 8 years ago and then gave up a few chapters in. So I was feeling kind of apprehensive about it. There was a lot of fright in me that what if I really don't like this book and then it'll sour the author for me or etc, etc. You know, all the irrational fears. So what is this book about? This book follows Eddie, a guitarist and singer in a very small fry band. That band in question has broken apart. Eddie has recently dumped her boyfriend. Her life is in a little bit of turmoil, and then it gets pushed even farther into turmoil as the Fae choose her to be their pawn in their war with the other Fae. Which, as you might imagine, is a big problem for her safety and generally everything. But one of the cores of this book is the music of it. For Eddie, she loves music. She is a full-time musician. She can't live without it. She's trying to start a new band. There are so many song references. But this book was published in 1987, so if you're like me, not a child of the 70s and 80s, then most of these music references are going to go right over your head. Even if you are a child of the 70s, a lot of these music references are going to go right over your head because they don't just reference 80s rock, they also reference Celtic folk songs, you know, with all the fairies, etc. It makes sense in context. So when I first started reading the book and they were throwing all these song names at me, I was just kind of discombobulated and feeling like I wasn't in on this joke. So I decided to put myself inside the joke. So I went to Spotify and I searched War for the Oaks, hoping that someone else had made a handy playlist for me so I could listen to all the songs. But no one had. So I made it, and that is one of the reasons why I really enjoyed reading this book, because it gave me such an interesting project and really helped me understand all of the music in this book. So I worked real hard on this playlist. It's every single song mentioned in this book that actually exists on Spotify. I'll link the playlist in the footnotes, but you can also just go to Spotify and search War for the Oaks and it'll come up. And at the beginning of the playlist, I did not yet have love for 80s rock and roll. Wasn't really feeling it, wasn't really adding anything to the story for me. But by the end, after listening to these literal hours of music over the course of reading this book, after going through all the legwork of searching for the right versions of these songs, I fell in love with it, and now I just listen to that playlist unironically because it's part of this beautiful experience of reading this book for me. And I hope someone else can take that Spotify playlist and use it to enhance their own reading of this book, because I do think that this book is so entwined with the idea of 80s rock and roll and Celtic folk music that it really shouldn't be read without it. And before I gush about all the things that made me really fall in love with this book, other than assembling the music playlist, I want to say that, yeah, the beginning is kind of slow, which is what made me give up on this book the first time. And I can't fault my past self for that because, yeah. But the rest of the book is so good that I give it 5 stars anyway, so let's talk about that. Okay, if someone had told me how good the romance was in this book, I would have picked up this book so much sooner, because I love a good romance in my fantasy books, but I went into this book having absolutely no idea that it involved romance at all. I had zero expectation of a love plot. And I do think that was also really good for reading this book. Because you know, in an average book, when you meet the love interest, you know that that's the love interest. Like, it's not subtle usually. They have a meet cute, it's very obvious. There's some mutual admiration, pining, flirting going on, oftentimes from the get-go. But this book doesn't do that. For this book, the beginning of the romance is so subtle. For this book, you don't even realize you're reading a romance until you're about halfway in. And by that time, you're already in love with all of these characters and shipping them and thinking, wait a minute, this is going to be canon. Wait, this is going to be canon? And that is when I really fell in love with this book. Yes, it happened in parallel with falling in love with the playlist. It happened in parallel with falling in love with the writing, with the book speeding up, with the book getting generally less boring. But if this book didn't have that beautiful romance at the core of it, I don't think it would be nearly as good. And I didn't need to be surprised by this romance to be delighted in it, but that certainly also increased my enjoyment of it. Our love interest is the Puka, a dog shapeshifter fae, who is the assigned bodyguard to Eddie, our main character. So the Puka starts out the book as her jailer, as the antagonist, as the fae that is trapping her into this terrible situation. And then slowly, that transitions into friends. And then slowly that transitions into, wait, he doesn't really want to keep her into this situation. He's trying to give her a way out. And then slowly that transitions into even better friends. And then slowly that transitions into a little bit of flirting. And then that transitions into full love. And that transformation, that slow burn beautifulness, it's what I'm here for. I love it. I love it when the book gives both me and the characters time to get used to the romance, time to slowly admit their feelings for each other, time for me to ship them, and just be enveloped in the romantic tension of it all. And you know what's another thing I love about this romance is the Puka himself. Because Puka is not the standard fantasy masculine protagonist. You know, the one that's very physically tough and strong and sometimes brash and is kind of tamed by the love of a woman, etc. I do enjoy those tropes, and I have shipped many love interests there. But it was incredibly refreshing to have a love interest like the Puka, who is both emotionally and physically shy, who is socially shy, who has his own agendas and plans. He isn't docile or passive. The Puka doesn't want to fall in love. He isn't trying to court Eddie, but he does, and he's sweet while doing it. He's cute every step of the way. He doesn't respect all of Eddie's boundaries. He is kind of playful sometimes with answering her phone, but he does respect all of the important boundaries 100%. And in conclusion, I completely understand why this is one of the classics of the urban fantasy genre, one of the foundational works of art that kicked off trends. Because yes, I can see in the urban fantasy books I've read how many of them must be in some way taking inspiration from the trends that this book set. I think if you like urban fantasy, especially if you like slightly slower and less alpha male kind of centric urban fantasy, definitely check this one out. And I hope you will consider listening to the music along with it. I rated this book 5 stars. And its book tone is Jade Green, which is a reader personality test tool that I designed. Jade Green means it's an emotional book that is character and atmosphere focused. Thanks for watching!